Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Michaela Peters. I'm not so great at sleeping these days. Like, since I've come over and keep time zone hopping, it keeps messing up my ability to sleep, and that really sucks. So here I am trying to look like I'm not tired, but I am, and then trying to figure out if I'm going to take a weird nap in the middle of the day or what's going to go on with this. I have no idea. But today I want to talk very generally about the difference between American and Finnish politics. Mostly I'm talking about European, and this is very general because, I'm not somebody who's very into politics, who specializes in politics, who really cares that much about politics, all these disclaimers, but I'm going to point out some things that have been said to me by other people, and when I mention these, people are like, yeah, that's true. So you can see whether you agree or not. I've already mentioned on this channel before that one of the big issues is that in the US right now we have a lot of polarization. You can particularly see this with left wing and right wing. One of the issues I personally have with this is if you care about certain issues, you're expected by default to care about all of the other issues in this political category. I don't think that's really how life works all the time. I remember asking my one friend who actually does care about politics, how does one decide who they're going to vote for if they don't really subscribe to either camp and if they cherry pick things from each camp? And she's like, well, then you do priority voting and you think about what of those things are most important to you, then you vote accordingly. And I'm like, okay, interesting. Now, most people are not really bipartisan. Most people are like diehard one or the other. And, it can create a lot of, let's say, conflict when you're having discussions with people. Now, in Finland, I don't know how people discuss politics, to be completely clear, but one thing that I did notice that was interesting is, I had a friend who came to the U.S. who was studying political science, and she was on the Fulbright, all that cool stuff, and she was explaining to me that one of the things that I've noticed that's the biggest difference between talking to, Americans and Finns is that agreeing on whether something is actually a problem is something that is a lot more unanimously happening among Finnish people as opposed to among Americans. For instance, whether gun violence is a problem or not. Most Finns would agree it is, whereas in the US, unclear. And so the idea is, in essence, people in Europe are all saying certain things are bad, right? Like gun violence, terrorism issues, like they're trying to, keep at bay some of the actual, issues. Whereas in the US, what the issues are is we're going to have to debate that. Think about vaccines, right? Like having trust for the government, that, is not something that's always happening. And it's not really as much of a thing in Europe, maybe because there's more trust in the government in general because government hasn't really done anything to them. I don't know. That's just how it is, especially in Finland. They really like their government. So I remember one person saying to me, and I told my other friend this who's into politics, and she was like, yeah, I agree. This one friend is like, in the US you think you have two parties and you think you have right and left. And it's true. If you think about the whole political spectrum, the US is really not very far on both sides of it. It's a lot more, with capitalism and free market economics, which is really a lot more what's happening. Even if you think you're a Democrat, it is still a bit more right versus super left is more of the dictatorship stuff now. But socialism and all of that communism stuff that we don't do in the US, right? So it's kind of this whole idea of you think you're voting right and left and you're really not, because at the end of the day, everybody wants capitalism in the US. So it's you're not really voting against two completely different political ideologies. And I was like, okay. And I told my friend and she's like, yeah, I completely agree with that. So, there is that to consider. And again, as somebody who's not that politically inclined, I don't really think about these things too often, but I think it is worth mentioning that these are just very different kinds of opinion things that you see happen. So honestly, it's not going to be much deeper than that because I'm just not a specialist in this topic area, but maybe people agree. Maybe this is interesting. Again, I'm going to stay mostly away from politics. This was a very high level overview. I guess I'm thinking about that more. Why? Because it's tax season. That's probably honestly why. Yeah, you got that coming up pretty soon. Eek, don't like that. It's going to be a bad year for that. Crap. Not looking forward to it. Okay, yeah, so you wouldn't have to worry about that if I was in Finland. All right, so I think that's everything that I have for today, and I'm going to leave it at that. And until my next video, thanks. Bye.